So guys, pardon me, but I do have a bit of a cold, but I do want to do a really tough video, and I want to talk about what happened to me, on December 15th in 2010. So I worked at a store called Conway in New Haven, Connecticut, and the store was like robbed by its own security guards. And what happened was that I was almost murdered by the police. I remember police aiming guns at me, and they're grinning and laughing. And then the other thing that happened was that, I struggled with suicidal thoughts for, many, many years, and I went down a path of self destruction. I also did not see the best support system. And then I've also said this too, and this is part of the story, is that when I did the 48-hour film project for one city, I dived into what happened to me and then the PTSD and the trauma that I suffered. And some people respect, but I lost control of my emotions. So it went from bringing up something about how I'm trying to use my pain to influence my writing into me losing control of my emotions and making an uncomfortable experience, which is my fault. But it also went from, some people respecting it, some people being offended by it, and some people just chuckling and snickering and making sarcastic gasping sounds because I made the choice to, because it kind of came off as not somebody struggling with their trauma. It probably came off as a special needs person losing control of their emotions, really. So, why not watch somebody, just, ruin themselves? So, but then again, then after that, really, then that gave me another form of, of hurt and pain and feelings to deal with. And, my life kind of was, and my life has always been shitty and crappy. And I would say that until I was 33 or 34 years old, my life was actually happy, really. But, part of that was like working at a hospital, working at a job that I was being respected at, working at a job that had zero tolerance for workplace bullying, and hiring a bunch of just really ghetto and trashy people, and then also working at a job where they actually respect their workers, and then also just part of it, and I hate saying that, is getting away from the Connecticut film community, because I met a bunch of racist people, a bunch of people who would bully me, a bunch of people that would say, oh, well, Byron's special needs, I'm going to talk to him whatever type of way, really, So, it was definitely really much a ride, really, like all this traveling, all this, just getting away and finding, what's good for me, was really just, what made my life good. So, I do want to like kind of talk about all this. That, when I graduated college in May 2010, it was kind of like, one of the college really sucked for me, but it was, a really happy point, really. I felt really respected. I felt like for the first time I left, I earned my parents' respect. And I remember, like, it was my family was just like The Graduate, or it was almost like, my parents are cool with me for 1 or 2 weeks, then it's like, a motherfucker, you got to get a job and other things like that. And I also remember my parents were very, very harsh with me, getting a job. Like, I remember, like, one time I was mad with my dad because he wanted me, because there was a job to be a tutor, and I remember like him supporting me and then into doing it, and then he flipped out at me for applying for that job where I didn't have a bunch of experience. So I remember like always being berated a bunch of times, for not being able to find work, and this was 2010, really. So it was, the job market was very, very hard, but also the other issue is that my parents knew about it, everybody kind of knew about it, that I have very, very high like book IQ, but I have a very, very low social IQ. So, part of what makes a person successful is not being book smart. You have to be street smart. You have to kind of level that, really. So, I really did not receive the best support system. So I remember, working at a job called Conway. And I remember like the first day that I worked there, what happened was that my manager Abu, like he was doing, he the way he talked me into the job was saying like, you got to work your way up, really. So start as a custodian, work your way up to a manager, really. So being young, dumb, and naive, I did that. I remember like the first day. I worked at Conway. There was this woman who stole like 50, 60 bras. He ripped like her purse in half. He would always flip out at me every 2 seconds because he'd be like, doing that type of thing, really, like really just like this ghetto, just really ghetto, misbehaving type of behavior and stuff like that. And I also felt like, I could outwork him, I could outshine him, so I kept on doing it. But I've told people the story that after the first day of work at Conway, I threw up all over the street, really, because of how much stress and anger that job gave me, really. So yeah, that's like the first chapter of this. But there were a couple of lessons that I've learned the hard way. That first of all, sometimes you got to stand up to your parents and be like, look, motherfuckers, you've not taught me any social skills. You know that I'm behind social. You need to help me get a job. Help me come up with a plan to get a job. Maybe talk to the Department of Labor. Or other things, or sometimes we have to use YouTube and research how to help get jobs, really, because there's some people who just don't know, really. But you don't do the Full Metal Jacket thing of yelling at somebody or berating somebody and making somebody figure out something they don't know the answer to. It's almost like when I used to do math homework when I was a kid. My parents would flip out every 2 seconds because I didn't understand this thing or that thing, really. So sometimes, that's part of, like, the baby boomer generation or the Generation X, which is, you're a loser, you're a failure. You know what? $100,000 jobs rain down from the sky, really. So the fact that you can't get a job, oh my Christ, you're lazy, when that's not true, really. So it was not that good of a support system. And but also too, like my college, and nobody ever really taught me how to get a job. But scratch that. And in like high school, I took like I think a life learning class or something like that. But our parenting class, and that was part of one of the things we were taught in the parenting class, was just how to get job skills. But there's a lot of people who are not taught that. And colleges, as I said, they're all about giving you a degree and sending you out into the real world. They're not really about teaching connections and other things like that. So there are people who are not really, taught how to get jobs, really. And sometimes, unfortunately, there are jobs where, people get taken advantage of. Or, I have a friend, and I'll say this, that, she's a very smart, intelligent girl, really, but, she couldn't find a job, so now she does OnlyFans and, fucks her boyfriend on camera, really. I think that, somebody who is like a master's student now, because her parents never really taught her how to get a job, really, that's kind of like a really sad outcome, is to say, okay, now she has to do this for money because, nobody ever taught her. Or I had a friend who I'm not in touch with anymore, she did prostitution, and that was also because, too, like her parents expected her to pay all of her braces and other her medical bills. But because, they just told her, what, work at Home Depot, save your check, really. Oh, well, that's not enough to save her braces and other medical care. She's done prostitution and other things like that. So sometimes, there's that thing too about parents where they give a lot of expectations, but if they're harsh and they're not so understanding, sometimes their children end up in situations that are not good, really. But obviously sometimes, children make bad choices. But at this point, for me to just go to work and also just, go to work, make $70, $80 a week, really, and naively think that it's going to lead to me being a manager and assistant manager one day. Okay, that's not such a bad choice, really. That is somebody who has naivety. So the second part of it is that I worked with this guy named Andre, again, same type of thing, really. Like, he's a very manipulative person, very supportive, kind, cool. Started to make some mistakes at the work because I had anxiety. He'd start to be a little bit more aggressive and undermining, and then he'd be yelling, cursing in my face, swearing at me. Sometimes I would throw up. Sometimes I would come close to crying. Had me sit in the chair, and he would yell and curse above me, really. So, it was another one of those things, too. Like, I remember, the first day I worked with Andre, he wanted me to actually, get down on my hands and knees and scrub the sidewalk outside the store, really. So he almost had this role of, that I'm stupid, I'm special needs, so I'm going to be, doing all that stuff. But I remember that I was young and anxious, and I had a lot of insecurities, and I was also that type of person that, I was always raised just like a dog. You always follow orders. You do this, you do that. You do not say wouldn't, couldn't, shouldn't. You have to do all this stuff. So sometimes, when a person's really, really naive and not that street smart, they're always going to be in that type of role, really. So it also comes down to, parenting in a way of what happens when you have a kid that's not that street smart and you put them out into a world where they get taken advantage of and they're treated like they're stupid. But also, too, or sometimes we got to learn the hard way. I do think that, once again, I could have easily just said to myself, what, this just this doesn't really fit really, or I feel that I'm being taken advantage of. Maybe I need to talk to my father. Maybe I need to communicate and be like, okay, in detail, this thing's happening, that thing's happening, that thing's happening. Um, so so that would avoid that situation really. And then this is also a little rough, but I will say this, that I lived with a relative who had mental health issues. So honestly, that would mean things like clothing was optional with him, his own trauma, his and other things like he dealt with, were going on really. And sometimes it was a little too upsetting to talk about those things. But I always kind of taught, whenever I brought up those issues, with my family, oh well, Byron, you sound like a 9-year old girl, really, So there's also, like, as I said many times, like the Full Metal Jacket. Part of life is that, okay, you know what? Even though you're living in a destitute condition, oh well, even though you're being abused at work, you need to just, it's all about the paycheck. It's all about saving that money. Really, that's all part about being American, is to grit your teeth and tolerate, all this stuff. So that brings me to the robbery of the store. There are other signs. There are many people talk about wanting to kill Andre. There are many people who just were saying things to me like, "Oh well, Andre has a small penis and whatever." Really, So, and I also remember like too, like when the store before the store was robbed, it was like Calvin and a few other people who worked at the store. Whenever like a 300-pound black woman would walk by the store, they'll be like, sticking their heads out the window, looking at her ass and everything like that. Really. So, it was kind of very clear to me what happened, what was going on at that job. It was a lot of just unprofessional employees and things like that. So the morning of the morning that the store was robbed, Calvin and his cousin went all the way back to the back of the store. They went back out. They asked me to clean the windows. I expected nothing of it, and they actually left really. So the cops came pulling on the curb. They came in. They were aiming guns at everybody. The cops were aiming guns at me. They were snickering and grinning when they aimed guns at me. And then also, the other thing too was that they shut down all the schools in Hamden during that incident, because the whole it was like under lockdown because you had two people, Calvin, Landy, and somebody else do that. Andre comes in late. He says something like, what, the reason why I booked myself to work in the afternoon because I knew that was going to happen. So when I heard that, I thought that he was trying to set me up to be murdered in his place, because it was a lot, really. I remember calling my dad, while the thing was happening, saying, I don't think I'm going to make it, goodbye, and other things like that. So it was kind of a rough experience. I remember being shell-shocked and everything like that. Then I remember some other employees coming in a little bit later saying, oh, well, Byron, you should have been a man. You should have prevented Tanisha from being pistol whipped and other things like that. You know what? You should have been, like John Woo or, Clint Eastwood. You should have just been there, just, like doing like combat and whatever. And what happened afterwards was that there are a few people who quit the job. I talked to my father and he said, isn't this the reason to get a better job? No sympathy just isn't a reason to get a better job. Once again, coming from that generation of, when bad things happen to you, you almost got shot. Oh, well, suck it up, be a hardworking man, type of thing, really. And then also, I know this is kind of personal, but I will say this, that, my parents have had some rough parts of their childhood. So I understand that, sometimes people who've gone through rough things in their childhood don't have the best, like, sympathy, really. If they're taught to kind of, work through things, not get stuck in the past, you're going to teach that. But the problem is that that's not how everybody works. Or sometimes, a person who's always taught, emotional repression, they'll affect their psyche. Maybe my parents could have been more compassionate to me if they were not kind of taught that at a young age. And I think that, what happened to me was that, I kind of became a little sociopathic, after this. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. So I remember like being hurt, and then also even after this, Andre would do things like have me sit in the stool. He would stand above me, curse in my face. My grandmother died. He would make fun of how my grandmother died. He almost suspended me for having to take time off to take a Friday off to go to my grandmother's funeral. The other part of it is that I got involved with, my ex-girlfriend. We were together in middle school. And, then we got back together after college because I wanted to feel love. I wanted to feel like, you know what, there was just at least somebody out there that really loved and cared about me, not just being berated every 2 seconds for not progressing myself by my parents, not living with a relative that had mental health issues that would be blasting music all night, clothing was optional, and then he was like, okay, if you want to sleep, sleep in the hallway type of thing, really. So it was kind of hard, and then everybody was expecting me to get a better job, really, and being like, okay, you know what, you're ridiculous, Byron. So I really did think about suicide for throughout my life, really, but it was really kind of like the peak of suicidal thoughts from that day, December 15th, 2020, all the way until, I took my trip around America for the first time around my birthday in 20, yeah, that in like 2021, really. So that period of 11 years was just nothing but suicidal thoughts. It was like every 2 seconds, I had an image in my head of just shooting myself in the head over and over, and just like these nightmares of dismemberment and other things like that. But I remember also during this time, I watched Midnight Cowboy for the first time, and it was one of my favorite films. And Midnight Cowboy resonated with me because that type of character too, who would have nonstop flashbacks, who would be like laying on his couch laying on his couch having dreams, not really doing much because I had, very much manic depression really. So with my ex girlfriend, things were it ended in a very self destructive way. Then after that, I went to therapy for a couple of years. My therapist really taught me personal accountability, and that really helped me out. But the problem was a couple of things. He never really taught me mutual accountability. Mutual accountability means that you hold all sides accountable. Like, for example, when I was dealing with workplace bullying and violence and being cursed at and throwing up after work and other things at Conway, I was kind of told by many people, let it go, focus on your career, and other things like that. Trauma, it doesn't matter. When I could have used to talk to a district manager, I could have written a letter to the president. I could have even sued for, emotional damages and other things like that. But again, I was kind of taught, don't do any of that stuff. You have to just get a better job and other things like that. So I got out of Conway, and my life was doing well for a while. And then when I worked at Southern, I had a coworker who would. Then when I was at Southern, it was the same situation. I worked hard. I was respected by some people. I was not respected by some people. When I was working third shift, I had a coworker who would come into work drunk, whip out his penis in front of me, pee by dumpsters, jerk it off a little bit. And he would get so drunk that he'd be speaking in different voices. One time he almost assaulted me. I told some of these things to two of my managers, but they said, like, whatever he does, you gotta ignore it. You still gotta work in a group, talking to human resources is snitching. And also during this time, there was not a lot of education on sexual harassment, but clearly now there's a lot more like, we gotta report stuff like that. So I remember having another like mental breakdown really, because I remember, and I know this is kind of hard, talking to my father about that, and he kind of was saying, I'm sick of hearing about Conway. I'm sick of hearing about like what's going on with you. Medication. Talk to Dr. Roy about medication. And that kind of put me in two different directions, really. That put me in the direction of that, maybe I need medication, but I also feel like, maybe family members or my therapist just want me to shut the hell up about my trauma, just take all the pills that I can, really, so that way I can kind of ignore my pain. And I kind of said, too, that this is where I struggled a lot in life. I said, basically, I do not want to become like Ned Flanders. It seems like when people aim guns at me, it seems like when people take out their penises in front of me, it seems like when I live with a relative that clothing is optional, it seems like, whenever I misbehave, really, my therapist is on me, my dad's on me, but when other people sexually harass me, when people do violence to me, when people make fun of my grandmother for passing away, when people at Southern Connecticut State University say homophobic things to me, when people say racist things to me, I'm supposed to just, think about being, like as my therapist put it, not another black man going to jail. So it was really, really rough for me. So I remember separating from my parents because of that. For a couple of years. And then Then I was also working hard as a filmmaker. I did the 40-hour film project. Had some up and down experiences. I've said the story many times. The first year I did it for one city. I walked into that competition. People were saying it's great that a black man's doing the competition. Other like quips against my race. The following year that I did it, I remember my dad was running for governor of Connecticut. He did a commercial saying that me and my brother are special needs, talking about how we're all black kids, adopted by him. So it really hurt me deeply because I felt very embarrassed. And then also, like, he doesn't really understand that I have poor trauma responses. But obviously, how traumatized can you be and how, like, upset can you be when you have, a relative, go on television and just, glowingly just come off like this white savior. Oh, well, I adopted these three blacks and they have mental health issues. It's offensive. And as I said before, my Aunt Margaret, she had a breast removed of, I believe, she had breast cancer, her head was bald. But if I did a 48-hour film project and I talked about her or showed footage of what her chest looked like, I know that I'll probably be getting an ass whooping, from some of my relatives. But my relative, one of my relatives can run for governor of Connecticut and talk very personal about my mental health issues. Or I will even say this, that, um, how should I kind of say this? My grandmother, when she died, she had Alzheimer's. So it wouldn't be good if I did a 40-hour film project and I put a camera in front of her and I was just like asking her questions and showing off how she has memory loss. And I did like a documentary about that, and then I put that in a 48 and I won a couple of awards. You know, that wouldn't be nice really. You don't talk about people's personal shit really. So when that happened, I did the 48 for one city. I went on stage. They asked me a question about what inspires your film. I had an emotional breakdown, and what I was trying to say was that I take all the hurt and all the pain that I've dealt with, and my films are kind of like a Carl Jung metaphor for all the pain that that I'm dealing with. The my Some trauma in my childhood, being betrayed by my ex-girlfriend, being almost murdered by the police, dealing with suicidal thoughts, dealing with sexual harassment, living with an inappropriate relative, all these things. But again, lost control of my emotions. I did it in a very emotionally mature way. Some people saw me as a special needs African American clown, and some people were sympathetic, and some people told me to shut the hell up, really. So it put me down another path of self-destructive behavior. I worked with another filmmaker for a couple of months on a project. Last day I worked with him, said people use you more than you think, and I just realized that my role in the Connecticut film community in my head was like, you know what, that I'm just a stupid African American that gets taken advantage of. So it led me down a path of sadness and depression, and I said, you know what, there was this girl that I was in love with in Vermont, really, and didn't work out. You know what? Part of being depressed and in my head a little too much. Is I just didn't really. What's the word? She looked at our relationship, our friendship one way. I looked at it another way, and I clearly needed to work on myself. So she made the right choice by I'm going a different direction. I really needed to work on me, not try to have like this. Let's live heavily ever after. That's not what you wanted, really. So I started to travel, and I said to myself, I want to feel dead. I want to feel dead. So the best way to feel dead is to not be involved in the Connecticut film community. Do what Joe Buck did in Midnight Cowboy and get away from Connecticut. He got away from Texas. I felt dead by going to Ohio. Nobody talked about me in Connecticut. Then went to Atlanta. I went to Georgia. Went to Virginia Beach. I went to other places. And then I traveled for a couple of years, really. And then I had self-destructive behavior at my old job. Because what happened to me was that, because I kept getting bullied, manipulated, and I said to myself, you look at this guy like Andre, he had a bunch of pretty girls. He was always respected because he knew how to kind of be nasty to certain people, be kind to certain people. Met people like that in the Connecticut film community. I said to myself, during one of my breakdowns, I said, I gotta just adapt to being a sociopath. Because it seems like all I see is sociopathic people. Like these mean, I'm going to be nice to certain people, I'm going to be horrible to others, So I remember going down that path. I lost a few jobs. And then at the hospital, I kind of realized that, what, I just can't do that. I got to be true to myself because honestly, I got to think about the impact that I'm having on people because sometimes I also learn too when I'm ranting and raving and I'm also outpouring my emotions, I don't, think about the other people that are around me, really. So I remember like when I went to the hospital, I really looked at my life and where it was going. I said to myself, I got in touch with my biological family. It was something that my brother really just put in my lap really when I wasn't ready. I suffered from depression for that. I was about to lose a job really, and when I lost my job, there was some like discrimination that did happen to me, some mental health discrimination, and then there were some things that I did. So what happened was that I actually went to a hotel room for a week, and I thought about, do I want to just, go, kill myself, or do I want to continue living my life? And I chose, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to actually just, keep on going really, because I felt like, I've done a lot of good things. I've hurt a lot of people. The best way to live my life is to work at the hospital, work like 12,000 hours, put a good in the world, atone for my sins. And then I also broke up with my counselor because I really, really felt when I got fired, he only really cared about what I did, but not how I dealt with discrimination. And then also when I told him that I was being sexually harassed, I was experiencing workplace violence, both at Conway and then at Southern Connecticut State University. He always had the mentality of it doesn't matter, but what I do matters really. So I told myself I couldn't really do that because he was going to put me down a path of what he wanted for me, to be a hardworking black man, understand that I'm a loser because I live with my brother, and then also go down the path of, when other people hurt me, it doesn't matter. The best way to do that is to ignore that and persevere. Never teach me to stand up for myself. Never really teach me, say, okay, Byron, you're a little naive. Let's talk about how to improve your social intelligence. So I left him because I was like, no, I just can't do that. I can't go through life being an upstanding citizen and other people just hurting me. But I've also learned a lot about, that through my experiences, I may have developed a form of antisocial disorder. But I'm also working very hard on, being better to others and other things like that. And clearly, I also plan to go into counseling to work on my antisocial issues. I'm also planning to go into counseling in the future to work on, just building my social intelligence. But it brings me to, where I'm at now, where I've traveled to all the states. I have Herculean goals. I've done a lot of like filmmaking. I've met a lot of amazing people. I've done professional wrestling reviews. I've helped people. I've hurt people. There's things I need to work on to be a better person. I met my hero Dustin Rhodes, and it was good because he kind of also came down that path of that hard worker, underrated, underappreciated human being, and that was kind of my path as well. Really, like that really just that hurt person that people don't understand the truth of. So my life has kind of it's been like a hellhole all the way until the time I was like 34 years old. My life was like a shithole. I thought about suicide and depression for over like 20 years, but now I don't think that way anymore. But it was really just getting back to goals. It was really finding that environment of people that cared about me. And I also love who I am because I've learned that one thing I love about myself is that I will be real to you guys. I'm a real nigga. I will be real to all you motherfuckers. I will tell you that if I'm hurting on the inside, I will feel that and I will share that. I will not lie about how I feel because I grew up, because I lived through so many times of emotional repression. Suck it up, suck it up, suck it up, and then explode in rage, and I'm never going to do that again. So I learned how to control myself. When it came to bullying and discrimination and other things that I dealt with and the Connecticut film community and other jobs, I've outspoken about that. I spoke about that. I've taken accountability for my sides, but I'm very proud of myself because I've really learned that, I'm not going to be taken advantage of. I've learned a lot from things I've been through. I've also learned, I've been an asshole. And the definition of an asshole is somebody who goes through life, hurts people, doesn't care. And then there's also, that's true to me and that's true to others, really. And as I always say, that if people think I'm mentally ill and treat me like I'm stupid or special needs, like I've learned that there's something more about their psyche and their mental health issues than me, really, So I really found a lot of happiness with my life. I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot about, how some people have children and parents are processing their trauma. And sometimes they're not always, and that trauma may turn into lack of empathy for their children. And then again, there's worse examples. Like, I think that I wish my parents were more supportive or more compassionate. But then again, I work in a psych ward where I've heard stories of children being sexually assaulted and their parents find it the funniest thing in the world. And so, I've had it I've not had it that bad really compared to what I've heard about other people. I've also learned that you are the only person that can pick yourself up, and if you are naive or get treated like you're stupid or taken advantage of by a bunch of people and had bad experiences, you still gotta pick yourself up. And importantly, no matter what we've been through, everybody in this world deserves a good and happy life. Really, that's one important thing because I think sometimes we're depressed or we go through a lot of things or we're treated very poorly or we're hurting on the inside. We kind of feel like a punching bag. We feel like trash. We feel like property. Um, and like I've told my therapist, the first time I saw him, I feel like I'm trash. I'm property. I'm thrown to the curb. Really, it's hard to get out of that mindset, but nobody should ever make you feel that way. And you should always tell yourself, we all deserve good lives. Really, we all deserve to, you know, have the pursuit of happiness. And we all deserve, and everything is we gotta be understanding. We always gotta be understanding. I do understand that, you know what, I understand like a lot of different sides. I understand the people that have hurt me and the people who have helped me and the people who are trying to teach me other things about life, really. But ultimately, you know what, I'm 34 years old. No, I'm 37 years old. You know what? It was very unfortunate that didn't get the support system that I need. But I understand that not everybody gets the support system that we need. It's luck, it's social intelligence, it's all that good stuff, really. But when you don't get it, you got to build yourself upwards. But like I've said before, and I'll say it again, that what, I'm very happy with the life that I've chosen for myself. I've chosen a life where I'm not in a film community where I'm kind of the black guy or I'm kind of the special needs guy. Nobody works with me until I'm treated with respect, really. And I will, speaking against discrimination, I've also found a job where I'm respected. I have a good family life because, it's not just my mental health issues. It's not just, my antisocial choices. If family doesn't see me in that light, then, fuck them, I don't need them. But I also acknowledge, too, that I've been antisocial in a couple of ways, really. So, if family doesn't make me happy, fuck them, I don't need them. But also, too, I acknowledge that, there's things that I need to do to be a more mature, more responsible relative and pick myself up. But if family's not the best support system, if it is kind of 50-50 where it is like with me, I got to see where I can be a better person. I got to see where I can change for the better. And I need to do a lot of changes for the better, really. But I also acknowledge that, my mental health issues or what I've been through doesn't define me. And if relatives feel that way about me, then you know what? I just don't care. I don't care what you have to say about me. I don't care what anybody has to say about me. And I think that gives me a lot of power and whatever. And then I also kind of learned too that even though I do think about all the times I've been taking advantage or treated like I'm stupid, or people overpassing my emotions or teaching me that, and as I learned as an adult, one thing that you learn is that not a lot of people take accountability for their actions really. And there's a lot of people that are like, okay, people are disposable. So if I hurt this one person, but I'm gonna do good to 10 or 12 people, what? I don't care that I fucked over that one person. It's a baker's dozen. You fuck over one, you treat the other 12 nice, really. So kind of learned that even though you deal with that, even though I've met people like that, really, that's just how they live their lives. But I do want to treat people better. The only reason why I'm alive is because I want to help people with my hospital job. I want to atone for the sins of the past. I need to just evolve into not being an antisocial person. But my trauma doesn't define me. My mental health issues doesn't define me. My goals define me. I need to be the hero of my story, not the anti-hero or a tragic hero. So I've really persevered over this traumatic experience that I've been through. And if any other traumatic things happen to me or any other bad things happen to me, I just know how to have a better hand on it.